Okay. Well, I would, as president of the Carolina DX Association, want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Our second Zoom meeting, and just appreciate everybody bearing with any little technical glitches we happen to have along the way as we try out and improve new ways of doing things in this challenging time. I want to give special thanks to Joe, AF1E, for helping arrange and make the connections to make tonight's program happen. And we have the great opportunity having Ken Karr, November Gulf 2 Hotel, with us tonight. And Ken was commanding officer of the USS Norfolk and the USS Baton Rouge. Has many ham radio accolades. Some of you may not know he was on the 2016 Herd Island expedition prior to the one he's going to tell us about tonight, the 2020 South Orkney Victor Papa 8 Papa Juliet expedition. So, Ken, we're very honored to have you with us and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
So we thank everybody from the Carolina DX Association for all your support. Couldn't have done it without you. And I'm getting a pop-up that says my internet's unstable. So if I drop out, I'll just try to come back in. Our expedition goals were try to get as many all-time new as possible. And as you'll see when I get to the results that we were quite successful there. Many unique calls, bands, 4 different modes, all kinds of bands, including the WARC bands, and make as many contacts as possible. The South Orkneys are in Antarctica, and that's in this picture, right the center of that picture of the Earth with all the different call prefixes on it. The South Orkneys are a group of mountainous glaciated islands. The biggest one is Coronation Islands. The one we were on is right underneath it there. You see Signy, S-I-G-N-Y. Not often visited. It was a decade ago, the last time anybody was there for amateur radio operations. There's a view from Signy north to Coronation Island. Cold, wet, windy. It's summertime in February and March, but it's cold, wet, and windy, as you see there. Our camp was located on Signy, right there where the arrow shows. You will see in the pictures the Orwell Glacier that comes down and covers Cemetery Bay, which was just to the south of us. We had our antennas all over the place, Elephant Flats, on the Marble Knolls, and so on. There's one of the permanent residents. Look at those eyes. And they're very welcoming. Elephant seals and seals are very docile. Leopard seals are not. They can kill you. You have to watch out for them. Picture of elephant seals on the left is a leopard seal. They like to be by themselves, and they have claimed at least one life down there that we're aware of. More residents, Gentoo penguins. They're great. They're friendly. They'll come right up to you, talk to you, and are great hosts. The other type of penguin on this Signy Island are Adderley penguins. And there's our team, international team. Left there is me in the pointy red hat. All the way to the right is our expedition leader.
Your video hadn't come up yet. We're still looking at the penguins.
You got a little bit of a lag between when your pictures show up to us. Okay, we see it now.
Yeah, okay. So on the far left is me. The far right is Dave Lloyd, our expedition leader, K3EL. Dave and I were on a previous expedition. In fact, several of our expeditioners to Herd Island 4 years ago, VK0EK. And that was a great way. About half of us were on that expedition. But you can see it's quite an international team. We've got the Ukraine, we've got Switzerland, we've got New Zealand, England, U.S., the great country of California, and many others. Planning and logistics for these things are quite extensive. There's over 5 tons of gear that you take with you, including the tents and all the equipment and the generators and what have you. So logistics and planning are a major part, 2 years in the making. Plus you have to get a lot of permissions from the State Department, EPA, National Science Foundation, and it took a lot of work by a lot of the team to get all that done. We partnered with Braveheart. Many of you, being DXers, are very familiar with the Braveheart. Nigel Jolly, a great owner, and sons, Matt, skipper, just a wonderful job. Could not be on the air without that kind of support from those guys on the Braveheart. They're just fantastic. We met them in Punta Arenas, Chile. And prior to that, we did a lot of preparation, including prefab of the tent bases for the tents, plywood and frames, and laid out a drawing. This is the operating tent drawing where we had 7 stations, all packed in about 20 by 14 feet. At a single camp, so we had to space the antennas widely and use different polarizations, keep from minimizing the interactions. And one of the things that made it a success was that Walt, one of our expeditioners, took high-powered filters that have fans on them, and we were able to use those high-powered filters and operate 3 stations on the same band on different modes at the same time. That made a big difference and allowed us to make quite a few more contacts than we would have if we hadn't been able to do that. Lots of antennas. You see the 7 bullets down there contain about 14 or 15 antennas. This is the antenna layout. You can't see them very well here, so we've emphasized with a little bit of a drawing on this one, and hopefully it's up and you can see it, with all the way from the right an 80 meter vertical, 17 meter VDA, 40 meter dipole, 60 meters. Not too many expeditions do that. We did that. We had 10, 15, 20 Mach-Sons, 12, 17 Mach-Son, 160 meter vertical, 40 meter Foursquare, 30 meter Foursquare, 10, 15, 20 Mach-Son. Just got another sign. My internet connection is unstable, so I hope you still have me. That filter network I mentioned is right there on the right. And so you see the 8 filters, and on the back are 8 more. So we had 8 of those filters times 2, 16, along with the patch panel you see on the left. So we could go into all kinds of different situations. Each one of our stations, 1 through 7, is labeled. Each one of the antennas labeled. And then we had a little bit of training ourselves to get the right plugs in the right place, probably like way back in the telephone company when they had operators that used plugs to plug you one way or the other. It was kind of like that to keep our stations all plugged in to the right antennas and not make a mistake and blow something up. So I mentioned planning and logistics. Here are a few pictures of our preparations, different people's homes as we got ready. The center there is Walt, N6XG. He's putting his filter array together there. And you can see on the top and underneath there, you can see the bottom also filters. All of them, even though it was the Arctic, those little fans were needed, that 1.5 kilowatts going through those filters to keep them cool. Planning on just logistics, sea van from California to Chile to a barge to a truck to Punta Arenas, and then from the pier onto the Braveheart. As you can see, we loaded on the 14th of February. And the team assembled for the first time there at the hotel we stayed in Punta Arenas. And there we are, all smiling and happy with anticipation. Dinner, getting to know the Braveheart crew. Skipper Matt is in the center left. He was also our skipper on the Hurt Island expedition. That was 2 weeks to get there, 2 weeks to get back. On this one, it took us 1 week to get there and 1 week to get back. Not quite as far as Hurt Island, but a little more directly south to Antarctica. Punta Arenas has a expedition, a radio club called the Radio Club of Punta Arenas, and they gave me a hat, and we really enjoyed being with them. Only one person spoke English, so we had our expedition leader, Dave Lloyd, who knew some Spanish, and our Australian member knew some Spanish, and between the two of them, we were able to give them a really good brief of our DXpedition. They're very helpful to us. And there's a good picture of the Braveheart as we were getting ready to load her up. And there we are boarding just as we were about to depart on Saturday the 15th. And I might be a slide or two ahead of you, but I'm going to slow a little bit here and let it catch up. On the left is the pilot house on the Braveheart. And you can see all the instrumentation. One of them is the radar, which is now should appear in the center of your screen. And those blips are icebergs. So at night in particular, we had to be very careful and use the radar, but even smaller bergs that don't show up real clear on radar, we had to watch out for them too, because the Braveheart is a small vessel. 140 tons is the size of that little research vessel, the Braveheart. To give you an idea, my submarine, both the Norfolk and the USS Baton Rouge, they're Los Angeles class submarines, 8,500 tons. So 140 tons versus 8,500 tons. That's the difference between a submarine and that little Braveheart. But that Braveheart does quite a job, and that's for smaller icebergs, because if we hit one, that little research vessel would have had a tough time. So we arrive, and we were expecting to make a landing, and guess what? Ice was packed in on our landing area. So Braveheart's got a boat that's specially configured to get bounced around in ice, especially pack ice like this. And we were able to get that small boat all the way to ashore so we could pick out the landing sites. But that would have slowed us down tremendously. And fortunately, the next day it cleared. And that's what it looked like the next morning. And we were able to get through it a little bit better. And that's one of our Zodiacs coming in with the initial crew to scope out the area. The skipper of the Braveheart right there on the Zodiac pointing to the landing spot and how to get around and through the ice. And that's his second in command, Neil, who's also qualified as a skipper, a master, and two of them were just wonderful hosts. And there we are making some of the initial landing. Now, that was where we landed equipment because we couldn't get the Zodiac any further in than what you see there. So we had to have people in hip boots and landed people in a different spot. But when we landed there, we put all of our equipment on these trolleys. And just like when building the pyramids, we hauled them all up the mountain to where we had our base camp. That is not the only person pulling that. There are a couple of people behind the pushing that you don't see, pulling that thing and pushing that thing. Push me, pull you, I guess, on up the hill to get to the base camp. That's where the people landed. And for us, of the older set, I'm getting pretty close to 80 years old. I'm 79 and a half. Climbed up that rocky cliff in order to get to the base camp. Later on, the Braveheart crew put together some ropes and ladders and platforms that allowed me and others to be able to navigate that a little bit more easily. And that's once we got to the top. And that is what they did later so that we could get up and down a little bit easier. But as you see, that's still a bit of a climb and not a bit hazardous too. But we kind of held on to each other. And the rope that you see up there on the top, that kind of a greenish, bluish rope, that was strung on down so we had something to hold on to as we climbed that. First day, putting together the tents. Those are the base boards of the tents. And when we finally got done, we put in on our double bunks. That's 14 people worth of bunks in that tent. So they were like bunk cots, 2 each, and we were able to get 14 in there. That's it with our gear in the tent, and we were there for 14 days. No heat. There's the operating tent, which is the same size as the sleeping tent. There's a picture of all 7 stations operating. And you can see it was quite cold in there. Everybody had multiple layers on, but it was warmer than the sleeping tent because of our amplifiers. There's a good picture of the sleeping tent going crossways in front of you, and going away from you, sort of orthogonal to the sleeping tent, is the operating tent. And in the forefront with that little rocky fabricated protection was for the generators. And then right between that and the operating tent, you see our outhouse. Everything on the island had to come off the island. Human waste, everything. There we're building antennas on the island, hoisting the 160 meter vertical. There's our 40 meter 4 square. And I might be ahead of you a little bit, so I'll slow down just slightly. You'll see that our modified antennas are connected on the ends, and we chose those types of antennas because of the high winds. They get up to 80 miles an hour down there. And what we have found that those that don't have that kind of bracing tend to get whipped in the wind and don't survive very well. So you see that antenna is very heavily guyed and a very sturdy antenna, modified Moxons and Yagis. There's another close-up picture. That one is on high on a knoll, so we didn't have to have it quite so high. And fortunately, too, because the winds on the top of those knolls really blew. There's our beverage going off from lower left to upper right into the distance. And our 70 meter EDA to the left, or 80 meter vertical on the spider pole fiber mass in that picture. 17 meter VDA, 40 meter inverted V behind it. And as I mentioned, lots of wind, and almost every single day we had something, lots of wind and lots of time out there fixing antennas, keeping them on the air. But by and large, we were on the air with almost everything the entire 2 weeks. I mentioned our little protective stone housing we made. You can see it on the lower right to protect the generators. And then all the cabling there on the left that we use to power all the equipment. Refueling was a treat because those generators are hot, and we had a number of melted pieces of Arctic clothing as a result of getting a little bit too close to them on occasion. We operated 24/7. We had 4-hour shifts each day, but we all operated a lot more than that. Anytime a band was open and a seat was available, one of us popped in. We operated sideband, we operated RIDI, we operated CW, and we operated FT8. There's 3 of us operating. Walt from California in the foreground, who did all the work on the filters. Rob in the center, and then there's me at the far end. And I think from the looks on my face, I was on 80 meters trying to dig out those weak signals with furrowed brow. We did not, if we could possibly complete a QSO, we did. We hung in there, hung in there, hung in there. Sometimes we're able to operate and run at 200 an hour plus, and other times we would have to slow way down, especially on 80 and 160, to dig signals out of the mud. Our doctor, great RIDI operator, CW operator, sideband operator, FT8 operator. Arland is quite a guy. He's been on a number of expeditions, was with us on Heard Island. He's a professional downhill racer. He's a commercial pilot. He's an emergency room doctor. You've got to have him on the expedition. Really gives you a lot of confidence. And our leader, Dave Lloyd, very experienced DXpeditioner, born in New Zealand. There's our primary organizer, Gene, and Haya, who's from Hungary. There's a picture from the campsite. Another beautiful place. It was really enjoyable just to get out and take in the scenery. And there's the Braveheart, a couple of icebergs in the background, a couple of rock protrusions in the bay where we anchored. Again, just absolutely beautiful. And there we are. There's a picture of the campsite with the Orwell Glacier, O-R-W-E-L-L, Orwell Glacier in the background, which came right up near our campsite. There's another picture, and the weather was very variable, and the next picture was taken just a little bit later of the same area, and you can see what the weather can do in just minutes. Everybody was required to wear bright colors if you're going away and keep a walkie-talkie, because if it got real hazy and cloudy, you could get lost. A couple more pictures of the area. Beautiful scenic pictures. Sunset with some of our antennas in the being outlined there. And after 2 weeks, it's time to leave. There's Mike. Mike, born and raised in Russia, refugee, has actually spent a lot of time in jail in Russia, escaped in the late 80s, 90s to the U.S., and is now a U.S. citizen, has been for a while. There's Rob, one of our great operators from California. Walt, after 2 weeks, and even Arliss, our doctor, was all tuckered out. We ended up, I won't go into this in detail, it's a little complex, but it basically shows we had an extra day of good weather and would have been able to get home in about the same amount of time as we had planned, plus a day. So we actually took an extra day on the island, and that way we were able to set even higher. We already had set the record. With that extra day, we were able to get even a larger record. 83,782 QSOs. Over 20,000 were unique calls. Our propagation was best to the EU, then second best to North America, and then down in the single digits to Asia, South America, Africa, and Oceania. Corporate sponsors, lots of great, you can't do this without good sponsors. And club and foundation sponsors, and you can see there's the blue one there. That's you. DX is the Carolina DXA. Thanks. Thanks from us to all of you for helping us out. Our partners who gave us stuff, worked with us, and the Braveheart crew. We can't say too much about them. Ben, Michelle, and Porky. Michelle was our cook, and boy, she really did a great job. Esau in the center, he's from Tonga. He was the strongest of anybody. I'll tell you, don't wrestle with anybody from Tonga. And Neil and Matt, our skipper and his assistant, the two masters, Matt being the master. And I'll tell you, they have their act together. It was just a wonderful time to be back to sea again, as this old salt would say. Our pilot team couldn't have done without them. They kept us clear, gave us heads up for band openings. We had U.S., European, Russian-speaking pilot, and all kinds of help. It was just really great. They were a major help. Thanks to the global DX community that made this possible. And I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed doing this. And gosh, if I weren't so old, I'd do it again. So with that, I'm open for questions, and I think we'll just stop sharing at this point. And now I can see everybody a little bit better. Did we have any questions?
And anybody can type into the chat window if you have questions here. Well, I see, looks like on somebody's screen there, Aurora Borealis, and I know that's something in the northern hemisphere around the poles. Is that something down south, and did you see anything like that?
Not on this trip, but on the Hurt Island trip. We saw it for 2 days, Australis. It's Aurora Australis, and that's the equivalent in the southern hemisphere. It's not as frequent and it's not as vivid as the Aurora Borealis, but we were very fortunate, and I really enjoyed seeing it because it is relatively rare. But when that happens, it wipes out propagation. And on the Hurt Island DXpedition, we lost at least a day and almost 2 days because it just caused all the bands to go quiet. Just a little bit through. If we'd had FT8, we might have had a little bit better luck. But FT8 on Hurt Island was impossible. It didn't exist yet.
Did y'all use FT7 at all?
No, just FT8. We had quite a few contacts. Second to CW, FT8 was quite strong. I might, one thing comes to mind, I'll just give you a little color background. Punta Arenas in Chile is a very interesting little city, and while we were there, they had a lot of unrest. If you recall, in Chile, there were riots and what have you. And while we were there, we got tear gassed. We saw the Chilean police using tear gas and other munitions to quell the riots in the city. There were buildings that had been burned down. And so when I'm seeing some of this craziness going on in the U.S. today, those of us on the expedition got a little preview of that kind of thing. But it was kind of faded off into the background with all the rest of the great things that happened during the DXpedition, including the trip out from Punta Arenas. That is a great, it's the Straits of Magellan. So lots of history. Then across the Drake Passage, which is very, very rough. Lots of ships have been lost there. In the southern hemisphere, the wind just goes round and round and round. Doesn't have, like North America, to stop the winds, Russia, North America, Canada, kind of interrupt the winds. But if you look at the map in the southern hemisphere, those winds just can circle around Antarctica. They get up to 80 miles an hour, and it can be tremendously difficult for seamen going through those kinds of waters. But we were fortunate. It was rough, but not as rough as it was when we went to Hurt Island 4 years ago.
I have a question for Ken. This is Gary, K4MQG.
Yes, Gary.
Ken, on the financial parts of the expedition, where were the largest support for the financials from? North America or from Europe?
North America. Northern California DX group was our largest contributor. And others were very, very helpful, including yourselves. And we really appreciated that. And then we had just hundreds and hundreds of individual contributors. The DXpedition cost close to $500,000 to put all that together. When you think about all the transportation, all the equipment, the cost of the shipping, the cost of the Braveheart, and all the equipment itself, and the costs are borne about half with all the supporters and then half by the expeditioners themselves.
What do you think was the percentage of your overall contributions, donations from Foundation? What was the largest percentage of North America to the total?
I can't give you an exact number, but over half.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
close enough for government work.
Yeah. And we tried very hard to, every time we had an opening in North America, to do the best we could. But we had major geographical constraints to North America. So it kept us below Europe a few percentage points.
Well, Ken, you mentioned propagation. Did you have any openings that were particularly surprising, a part of the world at a time of day you weren't expecting, or a band that opened unexpectedly that were of particular note?
160 and 10 meters that you might expect, kind of the opposite ends. 160, sometimes you'd sit there and just nothing. And then all of a sudden, good number of contacts. Now 10 meters is even more like that. They're sitting there at 10 meters, and all of a sudden somebody says, looks like we've got an opening on 10 meters. And then you get a couple people on there. I had a couple runs on 10 meters that really surprised me. And what I like about 10 meters, unlike 60, once it's on, it's on. You can get your CW rates right up there. And 180 and 160, even when they're on, it's pretty, just the conditions of QRN, QRM, and what have you. It's hard to make QSO rates on those lower bands as you can on 10 meters once it opens up. But once that opens up, it's great. 15, 12, 17, those were good too on occasion. They would surprise you.
We've got a question from Dick W3OA. wanting to know more about the filters. And did you actually have like 3 different bandwidths on each band? Was there like a filter for the CW end that cut out the phone and high and low phone, or how did that work to where the filters let you be 3 stations on the same band?
You know, I've got a question I can't answer. I'll tell you what, I will check with Walt and find that out. But it was amazing to us that we could put FT8 sideband and RTTY. FT8 sideband and CW on the same band. And we had a little interference on occasion, and you could tell I was operating several times where I would get some interference from especially sideband. But it worked out pretty well. But I don't know the answer to that because I don't think the filters were that. They were all band filters. So I don't. They were designed for the part of the band we were going to operate in. So we might have had filters that had 2 different band passes on the same band, but I don't know that for sure.
Ken, thanks so much for doing the presentation. This is Joe Spears. We enjoy it, and I know all the CDX members appreciated your coming and sharing your experience with us.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, and I appreciate your helping set this up. I hope, has anybody listening been on a DXpedition? That's my question.
Well, Dick's up there. Dick on mic.
Who?
Unmute.
Has somebody?
Yeah, here I am. Yeah, I was on Wake and in Palmyra as well.
Outstanding. Aren't they fun? I'll tell you, the thing that I like about, I've been on 2, 14 members on each one, and the personalities are as different as night and day. And it's just amazing how when you've got a common goal and a bunch of people, no matter what their personalities, that come together and just pitch in and pitch in and pitch in, and whatever you need done, somebody somehow pops in and gets it done. And the morale of our teams, both on Heard Island and to the South Orkney Islands, was just fantastic. That, to me, was one of the best experiences of being on a DXpedition, and I would expect maybe the same for you.
Well, yeah, you make friends you never would have had the opportunity to do before, and they become lifelong friends. And they
really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they're in the neighborhood, they drop by the house. We go do things. People that I had never met before, and except on the air in some cases. But boy, did we have some fun.
And Ken, we've got a question from John KYC, noting that Nigel Jolly wasn't on this trip and saying, does he still go on the expedition sometimes, or is he retired from that?
Nigel has been with us on a number of DXpeditions, but neither one that I was on. On the one to Heard Island, he had other obligations and was unable to participate. That was a long time. We were gone for 2 months. And this one, we were gone for almost a month and a half. And on this one, he originally planned to go with us, and then something came up 2 days before he was to go with us that required him to get back to New Zealand. So he ended up at the last minute not being able to go with us on this one. But I kind of would love to do that. He's a character in himself. Anybody that's met Nigel knows that he's a fun person to be around. And he's now a ham. He's got a U.S. license. Somehow we talked him into it after 2 decades of doing this. DXpedition for this.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Well, I really do appreciate all of your support, and wish you all the very best and good DX.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ken. We sure appreciate you sharing about the expedition with us tonight, and really are thankful of that. Also, take a moment to plug an upcoming Zoom presentation. Is a gentleman who was just speaking moments ago, Gary Dixon, K4MQG, will be doing a encore performance of the presentation he did for the Dayton DX dinner. So look forward to hearing more details about that in the near future. Thanks, everyone, for joining in with us tonight.